Karibu kwa shamba letu la Rosemary. My name is Agathoni Mushomba. I am a broadcaster, but I'm also a farmer, like you can see. Karibu kwa shamba letu. This is our rosemary farm, which is resting on about 4 acres. We do organic rosemary, and this is a very simple crop to tender and to plant and to propagate. What is rosemary? Rosemary is a herb, and normally we harvest the twigs, the virgin twigs, and normally we use the knife or the scissors to harvest. This is a twig, it's a virgin twig. The reason why we harvest the twig is because it has the highest amount of water that we need, or the moisture that we need, and it also has a lot of high quality of the aroma. Rosemary is bought or purchased by the consumers because of the aroma, the odor, the smell. And this one is specifically harvested as fresh for flavors. You can use rosemary to flavor your tea, your stew, your roast meat, your cake. You can use it in all the pastries. You can use it even in salads. And the reason why we decided to do organic rosemary is because we realized that the world is very sensitive on the use of chemicals. So this is a 2 years old crop. Unfortunately, it has grown faster than we expected or we suspected. We thought it's not gonna get to this height. And for the last 2 years, all we do is to propagate, to control the weed, and to harvest. Ideally, the kind of crop that we have done is for export, and our market is on export, but we are also encouraging local consumption. When we are harvesting, normally we harvest the virgin twigs based on the demand and the orders we get from the exporters and from the international market. And majority of the orders we get is between 1 centimeter to 12 centimeter. Ideally, most of the time, this is what is needed in the market because they do pack. As we harvest, we also look at the strength of the leaves. The strength means if the leaves are having a small twigs down here, we make sure that we harvest that which has like multiple twigs within the same stem, but multiple twigs on the opposite direction, so that you can be able to achieve the tonnage, because majority of the customers who give us orders, they concentrate on the tonnage. To start on rosemary, rosemary is propagated, or rather it is planted from cuttings. If, for example, I want to add on to these 4 acres, I just need to harvest the right and the best stem. I can, for example, cut this stem. I don't have to dry this to plant it. All I need to do is to make sure that I prepare it properly for root shooting. So I've prepared this one for root shooting. And so what I need to do is just to use a rooting agent, any hormonal rooting agent, and I just plant it on the ground. So to prepare the land for planting, you just need to make sure that you have cleaned the weeds, you have harrowed, you have disc-harrowed properly. The soils are as loose as the ground that you are preparing. Just like you prepare to plant things like cabbages or onions, you loosen the soil and make sure that you have controlled the weed. Now, to make sure that you get the right cutting and the right shooting, instead of planting this directly to the farm, like here, it's important to prepare a nursery. And so when we were planting this, we decided first of all to prepare cuttings, and of course we used the rooting agent, we did the nursery. Then after the root germination and the shooting, we transfer that into the farm. To prepare this farm, you need to make sure that you design your crop properly so that you get the right canopy. Like if you look at this farm, this section where I'm standing, the crop is not planted in proper lines, because the people who planted, because this was our first crop before we went on and adding on the other parts of the land, we did not have a good system of creating the lines, the rows, where we shall be using, when you are harvesting and when you are weeding, and of course when you're supervising and you're scouting on the crop. But ideally you're supposed to make sure that you come up with the right rows, and like we have always explained, there are specific measurements that are supposed to be followed, so that you create the right canopy, and the canopy that will give you room and space to move around the crop. Rosemary is a very special herb because it doesn't require a lot of fumigation and a lot of pest control, because the strong aroma of rosemary keeps away a lot of pests and a lot of weevils. However, there are so many other challenges that we find. This is a virgin crop, like I said, in this whole area of Naivasha. I have not been able to see another farm that has concentrated on rosemary like we have done. And so this was like a pilot project for us in this region. Majority of people from the county government, from the extension officer, from the district agricultural segmentation, they've been coming to this farm to learn how to educate more farmers to do rosemary in this region. Because of course you can see it's a successful crop. We did not test the soil, but we are supposed to be testing the soils to make sure that we get the right pH. And so later on, after we planted the first segment, I think it was about an acre, that's when we did the soil testing, and we were told, or we were informed, that the results were positive. Positive means that we are within the right pH range, and of course we are also within the right soil texture that is needed or required for rosemary. In terms of rainfall, this is a beautiful crop, and it has always been like this. It's an annual green, evergreen crop. It's always like this during the dry spells, during the rainy season. It's evergreen, and that's the most important part of this crop. It requires very minimum amount of rainfall. Like I think last week there was some little rain that was experienced in this region. You can see the greenness. And by the way, this crop is completely harvested. We have harvested, every week we harvest about a ton of rosemary, and every after 3 days after harvesting you still can come back and harvest. For example, like you can see, this twig is already blunt. Blunt means there's a knife that cuts this virgin twig. This is a harvested, and I think it was harvested a few days ago, like maybe a week ago, because you can see the cutting is still fresh. But immediately after harvesting this one, there is another shoot that is already fresh, within less than a week actually. So I can also now come and harvest this one. I'll throw away this one because it's not very, so wherever I've cut this, if I left it, within a week it will shoot again. That's the beauty about rosemary, that it can actually employ you, because every single week you are in the farm harvesting, and doesn't require a lot of water, doesn't require a lot of rainfall, doesn't require a lot of human labor. However, during the harvesting, for example, if I need 3 tons today, I wish you came during the harvesting day. I mean, there are so many people in the farm, because each has to fill about 10 crates of rosemary, which is really a lot of work. We still have not been able to come up with a better way of harvesting in terms of, mechanization. I wish I could be able to know whether there is a machine existing to help us in harvesting, because we have to do manually, and as we do manually, it becomes labor intensive. It's very tiring because you have to bend, and of course the crop is quite strong in terms of smell, so people who have asthmatic conditions find it difficult to help us in harvesting. People who have challenges with their backs, they have challenges helping us to harvest, and so that is the biggest challenge we have in this farm. On diseases and pests, flies like white flies and aphids are very rare here, very rare, but I will tell you the secret. If you look at this farm, behind this I think 2 acres, there is a pyrethrum crop that I have planted, and I did that intentionally. On the other side, there is also some pyrethrum planted. That is also done intentionally. The reason why I did pyrethrum around this farm is to keep off a lot of insects, because pyrethrin is really a strong pesticide, and it's now, for me, it's natural pesticide, which keeps away a lot of white flies, aphids, beetles, and butterflies and all that. So there is hardly such kind of insect in this farm. And ideally, in most of the farms, if you visit and you hit the way I'm hitting this, you'd find a lot of white flies flying around. But God is good, we've been able to use biological ways of keeping off such pests and flies. The only challenge I have in this farm is only about 2 problems, which I'm going to highlight on. The first challenge is the flowering, early flowering. Early flowering is a problem that happens when there is no sufficient rainfall, and this crop flowers when it's not supposed to be flowering. Now for me, because I don't concentrate on oil pressing, so I'm not interested in the flowers, because the flowers are normally used for pressing if you want to extract a lot of oil. But because for us we concentrate on the fresh herb, then this becomes a challenge because a lot of shoots have to be cut off and thrown to the ground because we have no use for them. This is a big challenge, especially when there is no adequate rainfall. The crop ends up flowering a lot. The other challenge which I have is when there is too much rainfall. For example, the beginning of this month there was too much rainfall, and when there is a lot of mvua, then rosemary is not able to drain itself of that much excess water, and so you realize there is some yellowing of the crop. I'm still consulting my agricultural advisors to tell me whether this is the result of much rainfall or it's a disease. I'm not so sure, but the last time they visited my farm, they advised that when you see the yellowing of these leaves, if you compare these leaves, you can see this one has some yellowing. You see this yellow, you compare what I'm holding and this one, this has some yellow color. I'm advised that this yellow color is brought about by waterlogging problem when there is too much rainfall, and because we have not done the terracing in this farm, it's a flat farm. When there is excess rainfall, then of course waterlogging problems are experienced. The other challenge that I have is root rot. We have a problem which you can see here, like for example this crop is drying. It's already dried actually. This is a dry stem. I got another one there that is also dry. This is a challenge of root rot, which is really a challenge to cure because you don't know which crop is infected. And I'm hoping that I'm going to get solutions very soon because they are drying. You can count the many of them that have dried up. And normally this is a new problem. I had not experienced it for the last 1 year, but for the last 2 months I've realized some crops have a problem, some shrubs have a drying problem. Ideally, this crop is not well kept. I'm supposed to keep this crop, or rather to trim this crop when it is 1 foot, so that it can blossom on the edges. But because of the complaint I got from the harvesters, from the people who help us in harvesting, that they're bedding too much, I decided to allow it to go to this level, so that if you are harvesting, then you can do like we always do in the tea industry, and it becomes easier for you to harvest only the twigs with a lot of ease without really bending. Rosemary requires a lot of extreme care when you're harvesting. For example, in my farm I don't have a cool house, what we call the pack house. So we have to harvest and pack in Nairobi. And sometimes it becomes a challenge to, harvest this under this very sun, and then of course transport the crop to Nairobi and do the grading and do the packing. So by the time we finish the packing, we have lost about 2 or 3% of moisture that is required for this crop to be as good as it is desired. So we are hoping that God is going to bless us this year. We are going to do a pack house here where we'll be harvesting, we'll be cooling, and we'll be grading and packing and taking it direct to the airport without much loss of moisture. However, it is always advisable to do your harvesting as early as 6:30 in the morning. That is when we do our harvesting here. The day we are harvesting, people are here by 6:30, everybody is in the farm, and by about 11 a.m. we are done in harvesting. Because if we do any other time than that, we may lose a lot of fresh smell and of course the moisture content. So for this farm we have improvised our harvesting procedures, what we call the post-harvest procedures. We have concentrated on using the normal coolers that we have in the vehicles, the coolers we have in the house. That is what we bring here when we're harvesting, and we use a lot of cartons to cover so that we don't lose a lot of what is needed, and that is the fragrance or the smell, good smell. I don't think there's any other thing that I need to highlight on, other than to remind you that if you want to get the best market for rosemary, you must make sure that you do it organically. Organically, I mean you plant using very little fertilizer. Here we don't use any fertilizer, we have never used. We don't use any water for irrigation that has any chemical. We depend on rain. We don't use any pesticides, and we have never used. I hope you're not going to use any soon because of the dying few ones. And we have planted pyrethrum around the farm to make sure that we counter all the aphids and the weevils and pests that would bring havoc. Like I said, if there is much rainfall and all the other procedures for propagation are employed, the yield per acre is amazing. Like I said, in this farm we yield a ton per week. Every week we harvest a ton. Sometimes you can even harvest 1.5 tons, depending on the rainfall. But the more the rainfall, like I said, the worse it becomes for us. So we have to make sure that we spread the harvesting so that we get the best. I am a consumer of rosemary myself. Look at my face. I use rosemary hydrolat to clean my face. I don't use any cosmetic. I don't use a lot of, oils and all the foundation and the rest. And before I started off, I used to have a lot of issues with, especially the sunscreen. I could get a lot of burns when I come to the farm, when I go to a sunny area. Nowadays, I use just the hydrolat from rosemary, which I make myself. All I do is I take these twigs and I boil them under intensive temperatures, and then I would sieve so that I can get the extra oil out, and then I use the hydrolat for my face every evening. Well, it has worked for me. I don't know whether it can work for you. I used to have a lot of lip sunburn, kukauka kwa lip sana, especially when I am out in the sun. But since I started using the hydrolat, I don't use lipsticks, I don't use lip balms, I don't use petroleum, I don't use anything. I just use a moisturizer and hydrolat, and that's it. So for me it has worked. There are people who use this on hair. I have shared with a few friends. I am hoping that I'm going to put up a plant to extract rosemary oil and make detergents and oils for human use. But the people I've used with the hydrolat that I make have given me very positive responses, especially for people who use this as a therapy for respiratory therapy, people who have extreme cases of asthma, bronchitis, people who have breathing problems have given me very positive feedback concerning using of the hydrolat in the therapies. I'm yet to work with scientists so that we can know how to go about extraction of the oil, the essential oil, which I am praying and hoping that is going to happen very soon in this farm, so that we can maybe start the processing and the making of soaps and detergents and shampoos and hair oils, because this is medicine for people who have acne, people who have what we call, the condition we call eczema, especially people who have skin problems. Rosemary is really strong and powerful. Like we have said in the past, our farm has 2 varieties of rosemary. We just tried to plant the 2 varieties. This is a special variety from this. This is the majority of the farm, but what we did is that we created some patches of this variety amidst the common one, so that we can see how it's going to fare. When we planted the 2 varieties, we realized that the leafing system is different. This is a bit wide, and this is very much, in fact, in terms of density, leaf density. This one has more leaves. So if you're buying rosemary for leaves purposes, especially for the people who are canning, drying and canning the rosemary, this is the best for canning, because it will give you more yield in terms of density. This has more stems, less stem. This one has more leaves density, less leaf density. In terms of flavor, this one is strong in flavor than this. When you smell, now I've become a professional smeller. Nowadays I see people asking me which one has more. That's how you smell, you start from the fresh crackly place to the tip. But in terms of durability in the shelf life, this one lasts longer in the shelf than this. When you do harvesting for exports and we delay our export in hours, this one will always dry fast and wither fast. This one, I think even the way it's designed, I think it's designed to withstand. I had a guest who came to my farm and he was trying to explain to me that this one withstands more frosts. The only challenge I have realized with this type of the crop is that it is flowering much. If you focus your camera on the crop, you will see there are more blue flowers, and you can see there are more birds on this section and more bees, because there is a lot of flowering happening. And like this other one, this one doesn't flower a lot. I think this breed requires a lot of rainfall so that it doesn't flower, because I was told the more they flower, the more indication that they are not getting sufficient water. And agronomist tells me that the more they flower, that tells you there is something that is not getting right. Either the temperature is too high or the water is too low. So the main problem of this is that there is less market for this because most people want this strong aroma. But I'm told that if I start processing the oil, then this will be the in thing for the oil processing because it has more flowers, and of course oil processing requires more flowers to do that. So that's basically the two varieties that we have in this farm. So if you look at the pattern of the farm, you can focus your camera on the farm. You will see that we have done patches of this variety, and then we have made a boundary, and then there's another variety there of the same, because we wanted to see how it's going to fare. But unfortunately it's not faring as well as this one. So, and this is my favorite because it has given me a lot of income. I don't think I have any other question, so it is my desire the new year more farmers will visit us here in the farm to learn more, to experience more on how to propagate, how to plant, how to harvest rosemary, so that we can grow our beloved country, Kenya.